Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Through the Trauma podcast. I am Amber Larkins, your host, and today I have with me Dr. Debi Silber. She is the founder of the PBT Institute. This stands for Post-Betrayal Transformation. She's also the founder of the National Forgiveness Day, which is celebrated annually on September 1st. She's an award-winning speaker, a two-time #1 international best-selling author. She has her own podcast, From Betrayal to Breakthrough. Now, she's also been on Fox, CBS, The Dr. Oz Show, TEDx twice, and more, and she's dedicated to helping people move past their betrayals, as well as any other blocks preventing them from health, work, relationships, confidence, and happiness that they want most. Debi, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Looking forward to our conversation.
But let me ask you, first of all, do you work more with people that have been in betrayal in relationships?
Yeah, we help people predictably heal physically, mentally, and emotionally from betrayal. The most common that we deal with is relational betrayal, romantic relationships, but it's still, we have a lot of people coming our way who've experienced a family betrayal, friendship betrayal, self-betrayal, and so much more.
And do you find that this is different people is affected differently?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the most painful of the human experiences. And in fact, I did a study, happy to talk about those discoveries. But betrayal is a different type of trauma. You know, if you've been through, let's say, death of a loved one or disease or natural disaster or whatever, you know that or let's say you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the lost, life will never be the same. But you don't necessarily question the relationship. You don't question your ability to trust. You don't question your sanity. With betrayal, you do. And that was one of the reasons why we discovered that betrayal is a different type of trauma that needs a very different way to heal.
Do you find that a lot of people have some type of betrayal trauma?
Certainly everybody who comes our way, but most people do, because I define betrayal as the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. And every relationship has them. And the way it works, though, the more we trust and the more we depend on that person, the deeper the betrayal. So, for example, a child who's completely dependent on their parent, that's going to have a different level of impact than, let's say, your best friend sharing your secret, your coworker taking credit for your idea. Still betrayals, different level of cleanup left in the wake.
What kind of got you started in doing this, and what made you gravitate to this type of working with this type of hurt, pain, trauma?
Yeah, sure. So you can imagine, no one studies betrayal because you like the topic. You study because you have to. So I'm in business 33 years, health, mindset, personal development. And then I had a really painful betrayal from my family. I thought I did everything I needed to do to heal from that. And then it happened again a few years later. This time it was my husband. So that was the deal breaker. Got him out of the house, looked at the two experiences thinking, well, what's similar to these two? Besides me, of course me, but what else? And I realized I never really took my own needs seriously. Boundaries were always getting crossed. And I'm one of those people that believes, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving business. And I decided, I couldn't find, there wasn't a book, there wasn't a program, there wasn't anything that was really helping. So I decided to go back for a whole PhD on it. And so I was in transpersonal psychology, psychology of transformation and human potential, because I was changing so much. I didn't quite understand what was happening. He was too, wasn't ready to look at that. And while I was there, I did a study. I studied betrayal. And I studied betrayal just honestly to help me heal so I could be better for my kids. And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my family, my work, my life.
Now, were these discoveries things that you discovered on your own?
This was doing the research on a PhD study dissertation on the lived experience of betrayal, physical, mental, and emotional. I did a deep dive, and uh, honestly, I was just trying to, whatever I learned, I just implemented to see, oh, wow, this really does work. And if the research proved that it didn't, I didn't do it. But it was through that research that these discoveries were made.
Can you talk a little bit about the discoveries that you found?
Oh,
And yeah, I would love for you to
I'd love
expand
to.
more on that.
Yeah. So originally I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And I sort of look at post-traumatic growth as kind of the upside of trauma. How whatever that trauma is, you come out of it with a new insight, perspective, awareness that you didn't have. You know, but when I studied betrayal and I looked at that, that's when I looked at it and said, the difference between other traumas and betrayal is the shattering of the self. It's because it feels so intentional. We take it so personally. So the self gets shattered. Think about it: rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust. Like I said, when you lose someone you love, for example, you don't question all of those aspects of the self that you do when you've been betrayed. So post traumatic growth didn't feel like the same thing as when someone truly and completely heals from betrayal, because it's like, yes, the invitation is to rebuild your life, but you also have to rebuild the self. So I coined a new term: post betrayal transformation, the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after an experience with betrayal. So that betrayal is a different type of trauma, because of that aspect of of the self, and because of that, how it needs a different protocol to heal. That was the first discovery.
Hmm.
Want me to go into the second one?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, sure. So the second one was that there's actually a collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's now known as post betrayal syndrome. We've had close to 100,000 people take our post betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. A few things about that. The first thing is, we've all been taught time heals all wounds, right? Well, I have the proof that when it comes to betrayal, that's not true. There's a question on the quiz that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people write things like, my betrayal happened 35 years ago. I'm unwilling to trust. My betrayal happened 15 years ago. Feels like it happened yesterday. So we know you cannot count on time. You can't even count on a new relationship to heal betrayal until and unless you deliberately and intentionally heal it. It will follow you around in your work, in your health, in your relationships, until and unless you heal it. And every few months, I pull the stats from the quiz. I'm happy to share it so you can see some of these
Yeah.
statistics.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Sure. Yeah. So now imagine almost 100,000 people, men, women, just about every country's represented. As much as you'll hear the symptoms, listen to these numbers as well. 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 94% deal with painful triggers. And if you've ever had a trigger, they're brutal. The most common physical symptoms: 71% have low energy, 68% have sleep issues, 63% have extreme fatigue. So you could sleep all night long, you wake up, you're exhausted, your adrenals have tanked. 47% have weight changes. So in the beginning, you can't hold food down. Later on, you're emotionally eating, you're using food for comfort, very common. 45% have digestive issues, and that could be anything: Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, constipation, diarrhea, you name it. The most common mental symptoms: 78% are overwhelmed, 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief, 64% are in shock, 62% can't concentrate. So let's just stop there. You can't concentrate. Let's say you have a gut issue, you're exhausted, you still have to go to work. You still have to raise your kids, take care of your parents, whatever you're doing. That's not even emotionally. Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness. 83% are very angry. And you can bounce back and forth between those two all day long. It's completely exhausting.
Hmm.
Um, 80% have anxiety. 79% are stressed. Just a few more. This one killed me. 84% have an inability to trust. 84%. Think about how that would impact your life. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
Those are alarming, but they don't surprise me.
You know what's even crazier about those numbers? They're not even indicative of a recent betrayal. This could be from the parent who did something awful when you were a kid. This could be from the partner who broke your heart in high school. So think about this. That person may not know, care, remember. They may not even be alive. And here we are, decades later, with symptoms because of something that happened decades ago. The good news is you could heal from all of it. That was the third discovery. But, you know, like for example, we had someone in our community in her mid 80s, and she had a 70 plus year digestive issue because of a family betrayal that she learned about over 70 years ago. So 70 plus years of a gut issue, right? I said 45% of everyone betrayed has a digestive issue, right? 2 weeks into our program, heals from a 70 plus year digestive issue. That's the kind of thing that happens when we heal. All of those symptoms heal as well.
Hmm. So I definitely want to get into that third one. I want you to explain a little more
Mhm.
about that. But before we move to that, I want to kind of rest here because I have a couple questions for you. I personally have had betrayal in my life. And if you feel like I'm over this, I'm past this.
Mhm.
And then a trigger pops up, and then you're like, I just reacted to that. I didn't respond. I reacted to this in a
Mhm.
not so positive way. Now I'm going back in my mind because I have an awareness of trauma and things that I've experienced. This is probably why I reacted that way. And now I want to fix this thing. But it's
Mhm.
like, it's so hard to navigate that. And I'm curious, working with people on a more general basis, like, is this something that you see?
Yeah. Well, first of all, a repeat betrayal is a classic sign of an unhealed betrayal. I mean, that is absolutely classic. And just using your example, if something is left unhealed, the opportunities that look like people keep showing up until and unless we finally, understand and learn something. There's a profound lesson. I'm not suggesting that the betrayal was your fault at all or anybody's fault, but what happens is there's usually a huge lesson. Something like, you are worthy and deserving and lovable. You need better boundaries in place, whatever it is for you. And until and unless you get that, you will have opportunities to teach you that. So, for example, let's just say something happened when you were a kid. And here's what's so crazy, it doesn't even have to be something viewed like big T trauma. It could be like, for example, let's say you're a little kid and you have earth shattering news to share with your mom, and you race into the kitchen and she's on the phone, right? And she says, shh, like she shushes you because she's on the phone. At that moment, you could have made that mean, I don't matter. Now, your mind will believe everything you tell it. So if at that moment you made that mean I don't matter, now you're going to look for confirming evidence to support that belief. So it's just an idea at this point. You throw some emotion at it, you keep repeating it, and then it's like your mind says, oh, I didn't realize you want this as a belief. No worries, go about your business and I'll keep this going all day long. So if we have between 60 and 80,000 thoughts a day, and if you have some version of I don't matter, think about how that would show up in your life. So now you look for, work. Now you're in relationships. All of those, like everything you do or don't do, can be stemming from that I don't matter. Do you see? So it doesn't even
Mm.
have to be something that was so traumatic. We give things meaning. So it could be something as simple as that, that once that belief is formed, our relationships, our life, our everything confirm that. So if you want to know what you believe, take a look at your life right now. It's a representation of the beliefs you hold. And what is so common is something can happen, whether it is traumatic or it's not traumatic. And then, like, it's really typical. We can come from, let's say, a narcissistic parent, for example. I mean, this is something I see all day long. And that belief was laid down, I'm not good enough, let's just say. And so we move into experiences, not because they're good, it's familiar. It's like, okay, yes, this relationship is an example of I'm not good enough. So it's familiar. We know how to do that. But what happens is once we get the mother of all betrayals, or the biggest earth-shattering shakeup, we can finally look and say, you know what? No, no, no. Like, for example, in my experience, here I was betrayed by my family. I thought I did what I needed to do to heal from that. It happened again. This time it was my husband. For me that was, like I said, the deal breaker. And I'll close the loop so you know how my stories end, both of those experiences. But for me to look and now say, you know what? That's it. Here I was 50 years old. For me to go back for a PhD, I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know how I was going to manage the time. I had never done anything remotely close to that big for myself, but it changed my entire life. Lesson learned, right? My lesson was put yourself on your own to-do list. You are worthy and deserving and important, right? So what happens is, until and unless we get that message, we have repeat experiences. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. And I've never heard
Hmm.
anybody really explain it quite like that. And I resonate with you 100%. And I think that the way that you described it will help people understand. It's okay to have these little, like when you explain the small T trauma, right? Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, I've had situations like that in my childhood that I can look back on, those things that stick out in your memory, that stand out, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, and that really hurt my feelings." And I know I'm 45, I'll be 45 in December. I'm like,
Hmm.
at 44, 45 years old, if I can go back in my childhood and remember certain things, there had to be emotion attached, because you forget so much. This is something I see even here on the podcast, where people come on and they're like, "Oh, I've experienced trauma," but it's not like bad trauma. It's like, no,
Hmm.
you are what you make it in your mind. Like, it can affect one person severely and not affect another person at all. Like, it's,
Hmm.
who knows? It's just our perception of how we view it, but also like built up experiences as well. You have two types of people. You have the people that have experienced this type of hurt, but then you have the people that have experienced it multiple, like over and over and over, but maybe because
Hmm.
they're in a household where there's abuse present.
Hmm.
Do you find that it's more challenging for person number two to overcome that, or to rebuild what was broken? Because sometimes in abuse situations, the goal is to break you.
Yeah. If that pattern is not broken, and then now throw a couple of decades at it, what's going on in the abused person's mind? Over time, it could be, this probably is the best I can hope for. Maybe I deserve this, maybe that. So once that belief gets laid down, and once they think, you add that to, I don't know if there's anything better than this. This is the familiar known. At least I know this. That becomes, well, you know what? It's better than the unknown. And I know that sounds so crazy. And I'm not suggesting it's your fault, but the known familiar, so often we take that. The only benefit of the known familiar is that it's familiar. That's it. But, you know, everything else that you're doing now that's new was once unfamiliar. You know what it's like? Here's an analogy for you. I'm very big on analogies. Like, let's just say there's this beautiful island that you want to swim to. You're on the shore. You go halfway and you're like, this is hard. And you go back. right? And then you're like, all right, let me try again. And then you swim out and you're like, this is hard. And I go back. And now you do that 50 times and you are on the same shoreline that you've always been on. However, it's the same. What if it's the same distance from that halfway point where instead of just going back, you're like, I don't know. This is sort of uncharted territory here. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I see there's a beautiful island over there. The only thing is I never kept swimming this direction. It's the same amount of time, but it's going to take me somewhere so much better. But we keep going halfway, coming back, going halfway, coming back. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and do you find that that's kind of the human, like, that's
Hmm.
what we naturally gravitate to as human beings?
Yeah. Well, and when I share the third discovery, you will see exactly where this plays out. But I'll give you another analogy too. Well, you know what? I'll hold off on that one because when I explain the third discovery, you'll see where all this plays out.
Yeah. So, go ahead and give us, I'm so excited, I wanna hear. Go ahead and tell us the
Yeah.
third discovery.
Yeah. So for me personally, this was the most exciting out of the three discoveries. And what was discovered was while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean those symptoms of post betrayal syndrome that I just shared, to this completely rebuilt place of post betrayal transformation, where we rebuild our life and ourselves, we're going to move through 5 proven predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every stage. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. Healing is entirely predictable. And I'm happy to share the stages if you want to hear them.
So, are you saying that once you know these 5 things, you're prepared then to make that, for lack of a better way of describing it, you're prepared then to make that other half of the swim to the island, like,
You are,
'cause you expect what's coming.
there's a roadmap. So the
I love
only
it.
thing preventing you from doing it is making that decision and willingness. That's a big piece of it too.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So,
Mhm.
yes, share with us.
Yeah. So it's all we do within the PBT Institute. It's what we certify all of our coaches in. Here's a boiled down version. So stage 1 is before it happens. And if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with everybody, me too, was a heavy lean on the physical and mental thinking and doing. We're so good at that. And kind of ignoring or neglecting the emotional and the spiritual feeling and being. Well, if a table only has 2 legs, it's going to be easy for that table to topple over. That's us. Stage 2, shock, trauma, D-Day, Discovery Day. This is by far the scariest of all of the stages. And this is the day you get the news. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. So right here, you've ignited the stress response. You're now headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot wrap your mind around what you just learned. This makes no sense. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules that govern you, that prevent chaos. Trust this person. Don't go here. These are the rules. And in one earth shattering moment or series of moments, every rule you've been following has just broken. The bottom has bottomed out on you, and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. This is
Mm.
terrifying. But think
Mhm.
about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything or anyone in order to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. This is the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this experience? Who can I trust? Where do I go? Here's the trap though. Stage 3, by far, hands down, is the most common place we get stuck. Most people are stuck in this stage, and here's why. Once we've figured out how to survive our experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma we just came from, we think it's good. We're like, okay. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, we don't know about stage 4 or stage 5. Transformation doesn't even begin. until stage 4. But because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, here's where we set up camp. We park here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And 4 things happen. The first thing is you start getting all those small self benefits. You get to be right. You get your story. We love our story. You get someone to blame. You get sympathy from everyone you share your story with. This is the whole victim thing. And because we're not getting much else, we take it. So we stay here longer than we should be. And now because we're here longer than we should be, the mind starts doing things like, maybe you're not that great. Maybe you deserved it. So we plant deeper roots, right? Because these are the thoughts we're thinking. This now becomes the energy we put out. Like energy attracts like energy. So right here, we attract people and circumstances and new relationships to confirm, yep, this is where you belong. Here's where we'll join that lame support group that keeps us stuck, right? Because we're only part of this group if we're commiserating right with them. Here's where we have so many people coming into the PBT Institute with therapy trauma. Here's where you find a therapist, but they don't know the 5 stages. So you feel heard, validated, understood. You leave, you are not an inch closer to stage 4. It's cementing you to stage 3. It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. And even worse, no, there's one more thing. Here's where you may be healing. You sabotage yourself because you're afraid to outgrow your betrayer. We're very comfortable here, but we're not happy. So because this is where we are, we're miserable, but we have to get through our day. Right here, we start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, whatever it is, right? To numb, avoid, and distract ourselves. So we do that for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. Amber, I can see someone 20 years later and say, that emotional eating you're doing or that drinking, numbing in front of the TV, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they'd look at me like I'm crazy. And they say it happened 20 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there. Does that make sense? Yeah. And this is why this is the most common place we get stuck. Anyway, if you're willingness is a huge word right here, willing to let go of your story, grieve, mourn the loss, a bunch of things we need to do. We move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo what happened, but I control what I do with it. Just even in that decision, you're turning down the stress response. You're not healing yet, but you just stopped the massive damage you'd been creating in stages 2 and stage 3. Stage 4 feels like if you've ever moved. If you've ever moved to a new house, office, whatever, like all your stuff's not there, it's not quite cozy yet, but it's this like hopeful excitement, like, yeah, we can do this. It feels like that. But think about it. If you were to move, you don't take everything with you. You don't take the things that don't represent the version of you you're ready to become in this new space. And there's a spot as people go from stage 3 to stage 4, where if your friends weren't there for you, you've outgrown them. That lame support group where you only had something in common, if you commiserated and complained, you're done. The betrayer who has no intention of changing, you're done. And people say to me all the time, Dr. Debi, what the heck, is it me? Yeah, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. And if they don't rise, they don't come along. You can love and appreciate them for who they are, where they are, but you're ready for something else. Anyway, when we've settled into this space, we've made it cozy, we've made it mentally home, we move into the 5th most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise, all those beautiful things. We didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now we do. The mind is healing, making all kinds of new rules, new boundaries based on the road we just traveled. And we have a whole new worldview based on everything we see so clearly. And the 4 legs of that table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded and we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
That's beautiful. Do you ever see that someone's like, say they've made it to stage 5, but then they're triggered and it takes them back? Is there working back through, or how does that work?
They when you're in stage 5, you're doing stage 5 things, you have stage 5 thoughts. The triggers may be there without the emotional charge. You don't, the way it works with the stages, and it's not this super linear path. There it's like this. You go forward, you go back, you go forward, you back, but you're still going forward. But the triggers, you're looking at them from such a different perspective and vantage point. It's like as you're climbing a mountain, you can't see over the top from stage 3, right? Or stage 2. At
Mhm.
stage 4, you're closer. Stage 5, you see things from a place of clarity and strength versus scarcity and fear.
Do you believe that once someone is through those stages, that they can still be triggered? They just are
Mhm.
viewing it in a different way.
Definitely. It's such a, you really, you become someone totally new because you've deliberately and intentionally recreated yourself. You take all the parts you love and you leave behind everything that no longer serves. And
Mhm.
there's a saying that I've been saying for my 33 plus years in business, and everybody within the PBT Institute knows it. And it's this, it applies to every single topic. Hard now, easy later. Easy now, hard later. Take your pick. It's going to be one of those two. When it comes to healing from betrayal, it is full on hard now, easy later. And the hard now part is a thought comes in. How would the old you view it? If let's say it's a boundary question, you're like, oh, forget it, it's just too hard. No, 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 no. Now it's like, did that work? No. I can't allow that to happen anymore. Change that boundary, implement that new rule, whatever it is. So you are really creating someone very new. And the people around you don't necessarily like it because they liked when they knew where you stood. But you're different now. It really is. We've always heard of the symbol of transformation, the caterpillar going into the cocoon and emerging as the butterfly. That's what happens when people are in stage 4 and 5. It is so common for us to see new levels of health, new businesses or passion projects, new relationships, either with the person who hurt them on a very different level or with someone new, because you're a totally different person. And just to close the loop on my story, rebuilding is always a choice. Whether you rebuild yourself and move on, that's what I do with my family. It just wasn't an option to rebuild with them. Or if the situation lends itself, you're willing and you want to, you rebuild something entirely from the ground up new with that person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband not long ago, is to totally transform people. We married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids as our bridal party. Betrayal will
Oh.
show you who someone truly is. It also has the opportunity to wake them up to who they became. Not that you have to do anything with it, but if you're different and they're different, it's a very different relationship.
Mhm. Yeah, and I do hear stories of this where, there has been betrayal, and then the couple works through it, and then they become stronger than ever. That's not only possible, but people are thriving under that, so I'm happy to hear the happy ending to your story. Um, I'm curious this though, do you ever find that someone may excel in one of or several of those areas, but still fall
Mhm.
behind in one of those areas? So let's say in your life, you're thriving in your career, you're thriving in your, relationships with kids or
Mhm.
family or whatever, but then you struggle with relationships with significant others, like
Mhm.
whatever that may look like, or vice versa. You're soaring in all your relationships, but then you struggle in the career aspect. Like, do you find that people heal kind of on all those levels, or does some people heal on different levels at different times?
There, yeah, it's sort of it's a bit of a different timeline, but you do heal all of it because it doesn't feel right or make sense for you to be, if you're thriving in one area and crushing in one area and completely bombing in another. The bombing in another is typically a mindset issue, a belief issue. And since you're moving through the stages and taking on all of your beliefs, that doesn't typically happen. But what does happen is the timeline for all of it doesn't always line up perfectly. So like I remember working with someone and she, let's say with her health, she was losing a tremendous amount of weight and getting all of a sudden getting all of this attention and all these things. And I know that if the other parts, let's say the way she looks at herself, feeling comfortable in her own skin, all of these things, if that doesn't catch up, what we do is we will sabotage ourselves because we haven't settled into it. So we need to establish, it's almost like a base camp, like a week or amount of time where you allow the other parts to catch up. So you continue to move at a pace that doesn't freak you out that you need to sabotage yourself.
The mind is holistic, just like our health is
Hmm.
holistic. So, I mean, I just give that as an example, but I can totally
Hmm.
see to undoing something is it's challenging and it does take intentionality, I believe. So when
Hmm.
you have these certain mindset shifts that need to happen, how long has that been your mindset? And how much have you solidified it inside of your mind that that is the case? You know,
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I struggled with validation issues. And I can't point back to anything necessarily my parents did. I don't really know where that came from. But when I
Hmm.
started doing a deep dive into my own history of like, what's wrong with me? Like, what made me make some of the decisions that I made as, as a young adult or, a teenager or whatever, I think a lot of it came from validation issues. Like, I just didn't feel
Hmm.
like I was ever enough. So that was something that I really had to like work through. When I become set on this trajectory of self-growth, I will become a better person. I will overcome this. And I made that decision. It was like, okay, now I have to undo this. And it's taken a challenge. It's been a challenge and it's taken time. And there's still even triggers will pop up from time to time. Like, what are you doing, Amber? You can't do this. Like, you're not good enough to do this. And I'm like, why not? It's like the self talk that happens inside of your head, you know?
Yeah. And even when you said become a better person, that's how you know that's where the work is. You don't have to become a better person. You just have to let go of those beliefs that don't serve. You're a great person. This is the part that we tend to believe because those are the beliefs that were formed. Like, right? Because if that belief is there, I need to become a better person. There's something there that's suggesting that. And as as you move through the five stages, you realize it's just, and I'm just picking on that because you said it. So I
Mhm.
hope it's okay.
No,
We say
fine.
things like, I am a great person. Yeah, of course I am. But this belief had me feel this way. And I just need to, it's not doing more. I have this one activity sometimes I have people do. I call it the sticky note self. I wrote about it in one of my books. And it's almost like, sticky notes. Imagine each time you had a belief, it was a sticky note on you. Like, I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. I'm not pretty. I'm not smart. I'm not whatever. So by the time we're an adult, we're covered in these sticky notes. So it's not a question of what do I need to learn and do and become. It's almost like, let me take a sticky note, look at it. No, no, no. I don't, that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit. And we get rid of what no longer serves and reveal that beauty that's underneath,
Mhm,
because that's who we truly are.
mhm. Yeah, I agree. I'm like, we have to get rid of those thoughts that don't serve us because
Yeah.
what we focus on does expand. And if you focus on those things long and hard enough, you are going to, it's going to manifest in your life. So you have to get rid of those negative mindsets. And it's hard. It's so hard to do. And it takes discipline and it takes intentionality. But I truly believe that people that do it, it it serves them well. Because they can then become everything that they're created to be, everything that they're supposed to be. Like everybody has natural gifts, innate things, like different things that our heart moves us towards, in this life, but we have to nurture those things too. You have to say, like, you have to know your gifts. You have to know the things that need to be nurtured and nurture those things because there's so many things in our world and in our culture and in our the people around us that I don't even think they do it intentionally. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. Parents, I think they want what's best for you. They don't want to see you hurt. So they'll tell you like, "Oh, you can't do that." And You're like, no, I can. And
Mhm.
what's the worst that happens is failure. You want to do something, be something, create a whole new life for yourself. What's the worst that happens? You get half to the shore of the other island, like going back to that um, that visual that you painted. What's
Mhm.
the worst that happens? I get to the other island and I don't like it. Now I swim back. Or what's the
Yeah.
worst that happens? And then where do I go from there? And I think that if we can change those perceptions, we can fully expand to what we want to create in this life. I think it's a
Yeah,
beautiful
and
thing.
nothing teaches us faster than learning from, from what's happened. And, that's why I when I'm working with some of our members, it's like, okay, when you're going to look back, extract a nugget of wisdom. What did you gain? What did you learn? And it's interesting because you said about just doing new things and stuff like that. I did a retreat with our members who were in stage 4 and 5, and there were 11 people there. 4 out of the 11 started new businesses, having nothing to do with what they were doing before. And it's something that we see all the time because, a piece of this is it's almost like you look at your experience and you think, if I can do that, if I can overcome that, I can do anything. Right. And then the other piece of this is when you are living in that you're living that stage 3 life, you don't have access to all these new ideas and things that you could do. It's just you don't you're just thinking stage 3 thoughts, making stage 3 decisions.
Mhm. And it's really sad because I see people that are stuck there.
Hmm.
And it's really sad because they really do have so much more potential, but you have to get out of that. And I can see why that's a comfortable area to sit in too, because you are getting validated in, oh, this happened to you. You're getting people are validating your feelings, and it gets comfortable to stay there, but you're never content with that. I don't think people can be content with that victim mentality. How can someone, like, you're missing out on so much. I love the way you broke everything down into these 5 steps because my brain thinks like that in steps and bullet points. So,
Mhm.
I love that because going back to your 5 steps, it's like if you don't get to that stage 4 and stage 5, it's like, can you really thrive? Can you really be everything that you really want to be in this life? And I think what's really sad is when someone gets to the end of their life and they look back and they're like, I wish I would have done XYZ. Like, do that before it's too late. you know, One
Yeah,
day,
regrets stink.
oh, yeah, it's all gonna, I mean, we're all getting closer to death every day. I mean, like, it's a sober thought to think about. But what are we here to do? Like, live your best life. Do
Mhm.
the things that is going to drive you and make you passionate about life and make you creative and happy, and then help other people like find that as well. So I love what you're doing. I love that you're helping people overcome that because I think there's such a need for it. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times people don't, they think like, oh, it's like we have to overcome the big things. What about the small things that has affected us,
Mm.
the baggage that we've carried from childhood, or the little things that we've picked up, all the little stones that we've picked up and thrown in this backpack along the way? It's like that gets
Mhm.
heavy.
Can I give you an analogy? It's
Yeah.
like imagine two best friends and they're both 30 pounds overweight and they're fine, right? They could still put themselves together. They still have enough energy to do what they need to do. And one of them one day says, "You know what? I'm so done with this. It's time. I want to eat healthy. I want to get the weight off, whatever." And she does. And she feels great. And she looks great. And now she's wearing clothes she chooses to wear, not just what fits. Like it's a different kind of life for her. And she says to the other friend, "Come on, it's so good here." And the other friend is like, "No, I'm okay." And the truth is, she's okay. But the friend who did that work knows what it felt like there and knows now what it feels like in this new space. And if anybody had the slightest clue of what stage 5 felt like, they would never spend time in stage 3.
I love it. And I believe that. So tell us, if someone wanted to learn more about you, your practice, your institute, where would they go to learn more about you?
Yeah, thank you. Everything is at the PBT, as in post betrayal transformation, the PBTinstitute.com.
I love it. And then they can learn more about you and more about your program and get involved and enrolled there if they want to check out some of your programs.
Or our
Perfect.
certifications. We have 2 different certifications too. And we have a program for the betrayer as well. So we have 2 certifications, one to be a certified PBT coach or practitioner, and they become masterful in the 5 stages. And then the other is to become a certified PBT support group host, because there's such a need for support when you're going through it. But it's not that support that keeps you stuck. It's all about lifting and inspiring as someone's healing. So if you're, sort of credentialed to be a coach or practitioner, there's that one track. But if you just want to hold space in a positive, uplifting, supportive way, then the support group host is the other avenue.
I love that. I love that. So there's areas for everybody to get involved. one
Even the
way,
betrayer.
shape, or form.
It's not going to
That's
be the typical betrayer who wants to do that program either. There's no shaming or blaming, but this is for the person who realizes, I just shattered the heart and trust of the very person that loves me the most, that I love the most. And we have so many people as couples. One goes through a reclaim program for the betrayed, the other goes through a rebuild program for the betrayer, and they emerge as 2 very different people.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so amazing. And I think that couples that have gone through something like this need, and not just couples, but just any type of relationship,
Mhm.
need a program like that. And I think that's where a lot of counseling and therapy may lack, is because they
Mhm.
bring, like, especially marriage counseling, they'll bring 2 people in and they kind of talk you through it, but you're really getting to the crux or the root of the issue. So I
Yeah.
love that as well. If you had something to kind of really like leave our audience with,
Mm.
what would that be? Like one big final thought or one big takeaway, what you'd like to tell my listeners?
What comes to mind, I would say, even if you have to repeat this a million times, it's worth it as it relates to betrayal. Even though it happened to you, it's not about you. We take it so personally, and it keeps us stuck when we realize it's the other person's unhealed trauma, issue, whatever. We can do our own work to heal and not have to uh, take it so personally. It takes work to get there, for sure, and that's the work we do. But it's not about you.
Hmm. That's really good advice too. And I will just say, like, this is one of the things when I was married and my husband had an affair. And this was one of the big questions that resonated in my mind. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And it wasn't until I got to a place where I was like, I've really thought through things. I had to meditate on this a lot. I really thought through things, and I come to see that I made a lot of mistakes. Like, I think it's part of being in any kind of relationship. You're going to make mistakes. You're human. You're not perfect, right? But they also made a lot of mistakes, and it's not. Sometimes it's their past traumas, it's your past traumas, it's things that
Mhm.
it's all different things. So
Yeah.
I just really hope that people that are listening to this episode really gather this from this episode, is that you do deserve to heal from betrayal, and you do deserve to heal from trauma, and you owe it to yourself to do so. So I hope that if you are struggling at all, that you will reach out to Dr. Debi. She is amazing. You hear her speak. She's a phenomenal speaker and explainer of these things. So thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for coming on and sharing with us today. It's definitely been beneficial, and I've gathered a lot from it myself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our Transformation Project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.